Dana's eyes stared in shock at what I had done. I had pushed that woman over the wall, and I didn't feel bad about that. But what surprised and worried me was that my husband had jumped over the wall right after her without thinking. As a few danger signs approached them, I shouted, "Someone open the gate! Let him in before it's too late!" 15 feet below me, Jerry responded loudly. "Don't even think about it," he shouted back. "If one of those creatures gets inside, it will all be over. Get a rope down here quickly. Jesse, I know you have a gun." I watched as Jesse took out a handgun and threw it down to Jerry. He quickly handed it to Sandy. Sandy looked around and started shooting, but Jerry was already moving. I had watched my husband many times over the years, and he always amazed me. "We're going to die," Sandy complained. "We're going to be fine," Jerry said confidently as a creature that used to be a man bared its teeth at him. Jerry stuck out his tongue at it and then swung his mace with precision. As more creatures approached, Sandy lifted her gun again. "Save the bullets," Jerry said. "They should get a rope down here soon, but just in case." As two more creatures came closer, Jerry reached behind him and pulled out his sword. He smiled, almost like he was enjoying the challenge. Instead of hiding, he moved forward to face them. He jumped up and kicked the first creature, then followed up with a decisive motion against the second one. After that, he fended off the initial creature. Thick, dark fluid sprayed as Jerry jumped back to avoid getting splattered. I heard two loud bangs as Sandy took out two intruders trying to sneak around. "You really know how to impress a girl," she said quickly. "This is quite a first date. I like this little gun. Do you think Jesse will let me keep it?" Jerry pressed forward to create space, deftly handling the situation with his sword. He expertly redirected an attack aimed at him, maintaining his focus on the targets around them. "This isn't just a first date," he chuckled. "That was yesterday when I saw you in action. This is our honeymoon." "Weren't you supposed to ask me to marry you first?" she asked, still vigilant. "Well, if we want to get technical," Jerry replied, maintaining his light-hearted banter despite the tension. "I guess I should take care of everything else first. Then I'll ask you. After that, we can plan some sort of celebration," he said with a grin as he skillfully defended against another creature. "We don't need to do all that," she replied. "But you could still ask me. How do you know I even want to marry you?" Just then, Roy rushed in and pushed me aside. He dropped a thick rope over the edge. "Jerry! Rope!" he shouted. Jerry looked at Sandy. "Go on! They'll pull you up!" he encouraged her. Sandy gazed at him, her face bright with a smile. "Aren't you supposed to be asking me something?" she teased. Jerry turned again and confronted another man who had once been a skinny teenager. "Maybe I need to think about it more," he said. My heart started to race. I still had a chance if I could just get him to forgive me. Sandy stomped her foot and pouted. Jerry looked around and noticed a few rabs coming their way. They weren't moving fast, but there were at least 10 more behind them. He moved closer to Sandy and knelt down. He smiled up at her. "Sandy, once I finish some old tasks, will you—" "Yes," she interrupted before he could finish. "Okay, now climb that rope," he said firmly. "I'll need you to keep watch while I go up." Sandy turned and grabbed the rope. Jesse, Roy, and another guy quickly pulled her up, then dropped the rope for Jerry. She shot me a fierce look as she reached the top, then yelled, "Gun!" to Jesse. Jesse handed her his rifle, and she started to shoot every rab nearby while Jerry climbed up. As soon as he grabbed the top of the wall, I reached for him. The look he gave me was full of frustration. "Jerry, I'm sorry," I said. "I was just upset when you called her your—" "Save it for later," he interrupted. "What later?" I asked. "Dana, there are rabs out there," he shouted. "You could have put her in danger. If one of them had hurt her, it would have been serious. And think about it. What if she had really hurt herself when you pushed her over the wall? What if she'd broken something?" "I was just so angry," I replied. "So was I," he snapped back. "You got upset because I called someone my girl. Imagine how upset I was when I walked in and saw my wife with—" I quickly covered his mouth. I didn't want anyone else to hear what I had done. He moved away from my hand as if it had stung him. "By your logic, I should have just dealt with you and that guy Diego right away, right?" "Jerry, it was a mistake," I said. "It was just a mistake. It's not worth throwing away everything we have." "Maybe you think that," he replied. "Dana, Every time you and I leave here, I trust you with my safety. I need to know you will protect me when things get tough. If I can't trust you when we're safe here, I can't do it again in the future. You might see what you did as a mistake and promise it won't happen again. But how can I be sure? What if you don't really feel sorry? What if you only regret being caught? How can you convince me it won't happen again? Because it won't, I said. I promise. That only matters if I can trust you, Dana, he said. And right now I really can't. You say it won't happen again. I never thought it would happen this time, but it did. So now I'll always be worried it might happen again, or that it's still happening. Every time we are apart, I start to worry about what you are really doing or where you are. If you could be with someone you hardly know, how can I trust that you wouldn't do the same with someone you know well? I'm just not sure if I can ever trust you again. If I can't trust you, I can't let you take care of important things in my life. But Jerry, I care about you, I said, feeling upset. You have to believe me. I do believe you, Dana, he replied with a sad voice. You do? I asked, wiping my tears. He nodded. You care about me like I care about many things, he explained. I cherish this mace. I have many maces, but this one is my favorite. I value some of my swords, too, and I really appreciate my Mustang. You cared for me as well, but you didn't prioritize us when you chose to do what you did. Then he took Sandy's hand and turned to leave. As they reached the ladder and went down, Sandy looked back at me. She didn't smile or act in any strange way. She had the same calm look on her face that Jerry had when he was prepared to engage. We're not finished, she said without raising her voice. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I looked at the faces of the people on the wall, many of whom had been my close friends just moments ago. Their expressions showed nothing but disapproval and unspoken blame. Jesse, can I have my item back now? Sandy asked. I need to clean it and check it before I can use it again. Jessie handed Sandy the sniper rifle, then she returned the handgun he had lent her. As she reached for it, I noticed she didn't seem eager to let it go. Goodness, woman, Jessie joked. I'll get you one of your own from the armory. Have you ever met a tool you didn't like? Not yet, Sandy laughed as she hurried off to find my husband. I reached for the ladder, but Sven stopped me. Dana, you know Jerry is right about this, don't you? He asked. Sandy is part of our community and you put her in danger. Sure, she got away with only a scare and maybe a bruise, but that happened because Jerry jumped over the wall to help her, not because of anything you did. I swallowed hard. But I said I was sorry, I replied. You didn't say sorry to her, he pointed out. You told Jerry, and I think you were discussing whatever made him want to leave you. I've always liked you, Dana. I've seen you as a daughter, but now I can't decide this for you. I think we need to let the whole community vote on it. I'll wait to decide on that until we sort out all the issues with the Rabs around us. But honestly, Dana, I never thought I would say this about most folks in our group, but things are getting serious enough that we may have to think about sending someone away from here. You can't be serious, I exclaimed. This is where I live. It's home for all of us, he replied. We all work together and look out for each other. But if someone is trying to harm us, letting them stay here might not be the right choice for the group. Maybe when Diego leaves for the next settlement, it would be smart for you to go with him. I was taken aback. Sven was clearly serious about this. But what if Jerry and I leave? I started to ask. Dana, do you really think he would want to go with you? He replied. Because even before what just happened, Jerry wanted me to separate you two. Sven, I've never asked you for anything before, I said. I want us, me, you, and Jerry, to sit down and talk about everything. After that, you can decide if I need to go. He looked at me and nodded. I'll do what you ask, Dana, he said. But instead of 3 people, there will be 5. From what I heard in your argument with Jerry, I think Diego should be part of this too. He should be there to help clear things up. And since Sandy is the one you need to talk to for forgiveness, she should come as well. I agreed. So we will meet with all 5 of us 1 week from today, unless the Rabs are still around us? A week? I exclaimed. Why do we have to wait a whole week? Because a decision this important needs calm minds, he explained. Do you really want Jerry and Sandy to decide this while they're still upset with you? I see your point, I said. I climbed down the ladder and walked away, my eyes filled with tears. As I headed back to our house, I noticed Diego trying to hide behind a nearby building. "Who are you trying to avoid now?" I asked. "Is it another situation you regret?" He looked scared at first, but then anger took over. "This is all your fault," he snapped. "How is this my fault?" I shouted back. "If you had just left my house when I asked you to, instead of insisting, none of this would have happened, and we'd both be fine." "Well, there's no point in worrying about what's done," he said sharply. "What do we do now?" "Who do you mean by we?" I asked. "Right now, I'm the only one who is on your side," he replied. "I was just trying to stay out of sight to avoid Sven and Jerry. They are on their way to your house to sort things out. I bet they will end up getting too close for comfort." "Don't even say that," I fired back. "Jerry is with me. He's the sweetest and kindest man I know." Diego shook his head and laughed lightly. "Tell that to someone who believes it," he replied. "Your friend Jerry is just like everyone else. He is not a saint. He was serious about me. He wants to confront me. And now, he wants to address this even more. You know what? He might just succeed. One way or another, I might not make it. He was very serious about not allowing the doctors to help me. I'm still in pain. And even if the pain stops, if I go to the bathroom, I could get an infection that could be very dangerous. On the other hand, if I run into him, he might really hurt me. And none of the people who make weapons will give or sell me anything. That's what you get." I started to say. "Oh, I'm not finished," he interrupted. "As if that wasn't enough, I already told you about that Sandy woman. She's like Wonder Woman next to his Superman." "Have you ever seen that woman shoot a rifle?" I nodded. "That woman really dislikes me, and your husband keeps giving her guns. It looks like she has at least 3 now. People are still talking about how she hit a target from a long distance. I do not want to be in her line of fire. Right now, all I want is some antibiotic cream and the truck they promised me. If they give me the cream, I'll put it on myself. Honestly, they could just give me the pills. That would be perfect. Just give me the medicine I need to feel better and the truck, and I'll be on my way. You could even—" He stopped for a moment. On second thought, never mind. "What were you going to say?" I asked. "I was going to say that you could come with me, but I'm not sure about that," he said, looking at me. "You're the reason all of this is happening." "How can I be the reason?" I shouted back. "From the first moment I saw you, you've messed up my life," he said, his voice full of frustration. "When I sparred with your husband near the wall, I just wanted to do well. I wanted to prove I was a good fighter and show that I would keep going no matter what. I was trying to impress everyone, especially after you started acting like you were interested in me," he admitted. "I did not act that way toward you," I yelled. "You really did," he replied. "And you smiled at me too. When you did that, I think your husband saw it as disrespect, and you did it in front of everyone. If I were your husband and you did that, I would have confronted you right away. But your husband isn't like that. He took his anger out on me instead. He went from being annoyed with me to really disliking me because you chose to act in a way that caused misunderstanding." "That's not fair," I said. "Like being a bad guy is so much better than being a tease," he said. "Or were you just trying to play games?" "Maybe," I replied. "Maybe I just wanted him to feel what it's like to be a bit envious. That girl Sandy came to town and really went after him. She even showed up at our house the night before." "Yeah, she has some guts," he said. "But you just made a mistake. He was never going to fall for her, and if you knew him, you would have known that. He's the kind of guy who always does the right thing. The real issue is that you chose the wrong person to get involved with." "Jerry really cares about me," I insisted. "Not him, silly Maine," he said. "I'm not someone you can tease. If you show off in front of me, I'm going to want more." "But you tricked me," I said. "You made me think that you could really help me and—" "Me," he said, pointing at himself. "Some men will do whatever it takes to get what they want. You gave a chance, and I took it. You can only blame yourself. We might as well work together to fix this problem for both of us." "Maybe," I replied. "What do you hope to gain from this?" he asked. "I want my husband back and for everything to go back to normal," I said. "I want things to be the same as they were before you came along. And I hate to say it since we're trying to be nice, but I want you to leave. I don't want you to remind him of my mistakes every time he sees you. In an ideal world, you and Sandy would leave and never come back, but honestly, I'd be fine if you both just vanished. You're out of your mind, he said. None of that is going to happen. You might as well lower your hopes a bit because they're way too high. Well, what do you want? I asked. I just want to survive, he said. I'd be happy if they gave me the truck with some supplies and let me move to a new place once the dangers around the camp are cleared. At first, I thought living here was good because you all seem to have a nice setup, but your husband is very dangerous. He's the kind of guy who seems like a warrior. He might act friendly on the outside, but deep down, he would just be waiting for a chance to put me in a difficult spot. He cared about you, and I messed that up. He's not like me. What do you mean by that? I said. Look, don't take it the wrong way, but to me, you're just someone else in the same situation. If I get close to you today and someone else does tomorrow, it doesn't matter much to me. Maybe I'd even join in. If the dangers come after us, I'll tell you to run, but it won't bother me if something happens to you. That's just how things are these days, I said with a frown, feeling frustrated with him. Your husband sees you as someone very special, he replied. He wouldn't want to share you with anyone. The fact that we were together means things have changed between you two. I really don't think he will take you back. Also, you need to be aware of this. You're an attractive woman, but Sandy, even if I don't like her, is more beautiful. She just seems to fit in well with him. He might still care about you, but I think that once he and Sandy are close, he'll move on from the hurt. You should focus on getting through this, whether it's here or somewhere new. You might meet someone else, but your husband is not coming back. As I listened to him, I realized some of what he said was true. I recognized then that I had blamed Diego for everything that happened to me, but a lot of it was really my fault. What I did today, in my anger, made things even worse. Not only did I hurt my marriage, but I also risked having to leave the community I loved. Jerry, all I felt was numbness as Sandy and I walked away from the wall after our adventure. I didn't know how to feel about anything. Honestly, I hadn't been thinking or feeling much at all. I was just reacting. I felt like a bottle cap tossed around by waves on a beach. The water was too strong for me to do anything but go along with it. I was carried in whatever direction the waves chose. I couldn't believe that all of this had happened in such a short time. It all started when I felt uneasy about how my wife reacted to a newcomer. Less than a day later, my feelings of discomfort turned out to be valid when I walked in and found him with her in our home. It affected our relationship deeply, and I questioned whether I could continue in it. Surprisingly, Dana said she did not want to break up, but I no longer trusted her. At that moment, I thought it was best for Dana and me to go our own ways. I am not a perfect person, but I just couldn't see myself causing her pain even after what had happened. Deep down, I still cared about her in some way. Diego, the new guy, was different. From our first training session where he showed little regard for our team, I felt a strong frustration towards him. This was unusual for me because I am not an aggressive person. There are so few people left in the world and very few children are being born these days. Normally, I try to find some good in everyone, even if they have done unkind things. I like to believe that people can still help our community. But when it comes to Diego, I couldn't see anything redeeming. He is big and strong, and there are many ways he could be of use to us. Yet, all I can think about is my need to see him acknowledge his actions. If that makes me a flawed person, then I accept it. The next important event was when we found out that a large group of zombie-like creatures, which we call rabs, had completely surrounded our home. At first, this felt very frightening. However, the chances of them getting inside our walls are almost none. There is only one entrance, and it's watched over every hour of the day by people we trust a lot. We also have stations along the wall to check that there are no breaks except at the gate. Right now, the rabs outside of our gate do not pose a short-term danger. The significant issue we face is being stuck inside our walls. We might run out of food and supplies because nothing new is coming in. We depend on trading, and our scouts go out to bring back food and items we can trade with others. Being completely surrounded means we cannot leave, and no supplies can come to us. If this situation lasts only a few days or a week, we'll manage. But if it goes on longer, we could get into trouble. I was called to the wall to learn more about the Rabs. Sven, our leader, and I were talking about whether they were being controlled, which could be very dangerous for us. I was showing Sven how well one of our new members could shoot. Sandy impressed Sven with her talent for shooting at long distances. I felt proud of her. I had saved her and brought her here. I also felt good because I had given her the chance to be a shooter. I called her my girl. Looking back, that might not have been the best term to use since my wife, Dana, had shown jealousy about Sandy liking me. At that moment, I liked seeing Dana's reaction when I referred to Sandy affectionately. A little while later, Dana had lost her temper and confronted Sandy. Now, both Dana and Diego were at risk of being excluded from our community. As Sandy and I walked to our homes, I felt troubled. Sandy paused in front of me. I noticed she was limping a bit. I guessed she must have hurt herself when she fell from the wall. "So, when are we getting married?" she asked. "And how does that work? I've read about how they did it in the old world before everything got chaotic." I smiled at her. From the very first moment I saw her without the dirt and dust, I felt something unusual about this woman. Now, as she stood close in front of me, those feelings were even stronger. "Sandy, do you really want to marry me?" I asked. I was unsure because I hadn't taken it seriously at first. For me, it had just been a way to respond to Dana's betrayal. But the more I thought about it, the better it seemed. "Of course I do," she said with a big smile. That smile lit up everything around her. It made me feel that no matter how hard things got, we would find a way together. I just want to know how marriage works in this community. In some places I've been, marriage just means living together. But both people can still do whatever they want outside of that. I don't want that kind of marriage. I want the kind of relationship where you and I are committed to each other and don't get involved with anyone else. "But isn't that how marriage is supposed to be?" I asked. She shook her head. "People today are struggling," she said. "In many places, they want children so badly that they think it's okay for anyone to be with anyone else, just hoping to find the right mix to have healthy kids." "All right, I like what you want," I said. "From now on, I am yours completely." "And I am yours completely," she smiled. Then she tilted her head and looked at me playfully. "So where are we going now?" "What do you mean?" I asked. She grinned at me again. "Am I going back to the house where all the single women who cook live, or are we going somewhere together?" "Oh, we're going somewhere together," I said with a smile. "We're heading to the medical center to check on your leg." "It'll be fine," she replied. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded and smiled at her. She stopped walking and turned to look at me. "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" I replied. "You jumped over the wall to help me," she said, looking serious. "I didn't think about it at the time, but why would you? Who does that? You could have been hurt too. What if—" Tears started to form in her eyes. I couldn't help it. I hugged her, pulling her close and wrapping my arms around her right there on the street. She hugged me back and cried. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked, her voice shaky. I didn't have an answer. I just let her cry. I knew part of the reason was how close we had come to danger, to maybe losing ourselves. "And your wife is so blind," she said, her voice full of emotion. "She doesn't see what she lost. That man she was with is the worst." "I told you what he did." I gently rubbed her back. "Yes, Sandy, you told us," I replied. "If I get the chance, I'm going to make them pay," she said. "Diego is my responsibility," I said, still rubbing her back. As we stood together in the street, more and more people gathered around us. After a moment, her mother came through the crowd. "She's okay," I reassured her. "We're heading to the clinic to check on her leg." "Oh, I'm not worried about her," her mother smiled. "I knew she'd be safe with you. What surprised me was hearing about you jumping off the wall to help her. I came to see if you two wanted something nice to eat. We should celebrate that you both got through this tough time safely. We should also be glad that we're all here together and safe." "Anything you make is great," I said. "But I really liked that cake you made the other day." Everyone started laughing after that. I took Sandy to the first aid tent and they got her on a table to check her out. She was a bit shaken and had a couple of small sprains and a big bruise on her hip. I brought her back to my house. I sat her at the kitchen table while I heated some water in a big pot over the fire. Then, I went to the bathroom and turned on the tap in the bathtub. It took some time for the tub to fill up. The water in the pot heated quickly over the flames. I poured the hot water into the tub and put the pot back on the fire. I added some herbs to the water in the tub and took her into the bathroom. I opened the bathroom closet, found a plastic-wrapped package, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a robe for you," I said. "I found a place last fall where there were lots of them. I think we have about 10 or 12 of them left." "But there are 2 robes already here," she replied. I grabbed one from the hook on the door and tossed it into a pile of clothes in the corner. "That one belongs to Dana," I explained. "I'm taking all her things to her. I want you to have your own." She smiled and took the package. "So, what do I do now?" she asked, looking at me. "Now you can dip your hand in the water and tell me if it feels warm enough for you," I said. She gave me a curious look. "Are you saying I can take a bath with warm water?" she asked. "Yes. I've added some herbs to the water to make it smell nice and to help you relax," I said. "And there's soap to make it bubbly, so you don't have to worry about me seeing anything." She interrupted me with laughter. She put her hand in the tub and said the water was just right. "I'm heating some more water, so if it starts to cool down, just let me know, and I'll add some hot water," I explained. "Let you know?" she asked. "Are you going to be here while I'll be in the house," I said. "But I want you to relax and enjoy a warm bath. Take some time to think about everything that happened today. Remember, we're okay. We got through it just fine. Let the warm water and the herbs calm your body while you clear your mind. I'm going to the kitchen to get us something to eat, all right?" She nodded, then smiled and shook her head. Less than a half hour later, I returned home with a cart. It had 2 plates of food and a dessert. Sandy's mom had kindly helped me with the meal. As we walked in, she set the food down on the table and looked around my cozy little house. "Where is she?" she asked. I pointed toward one of the bedrooms. She peeked inside and shook her head. "Maybe she thought I would sleep in that room and she could have the other one," I said, pointing to the other room. She shook her head again. "Is she still in the bathtub?" I asked. "You have a bathtub?" she replied. "Yes, but it only has cold water," I said. "The shower is cold too. If you want hot water, you have to heat it over the fireplace." She looked at me like I was joking. "You really have a bathtub?" she repeated. "Well, you can use it if you want," I said. "I want to," she said. "But not today." She peeked into the bathroom and came back with a smile. "Come here," she whispered. I looked inside and saw Sandy, covered in bubbles, asleep in the tub with just her head sticking out. "The water is still warm," she said, "and it smells so nice." "She's probably very tired after everything today," I said. Her mom nodded. "How long will the food stay warm?" I asked. "She needs her rest." "Not long," her mom said. "I placed each plate on hot, flat stones to keep them warm, but it won't stay warm for more than an hour." "We need to wake her up so she can eat," I said. I nodded my head. "Why don't you wake her while I get the food ready?" she suggested. I started to fidget a bit. Maybe you should do it," I replied. "Why?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I'm the one who cooks." Her tone showed how proud she was of that. "You really like cooking, don't you?" I asked. She smiled and nodded. "Yes. Because of you, I'm alive in a world that can be tough on women, especially younger ones. I get to cook for a living again. So yes, I love cooking and making meals for others. Let me do it." "But she might feel sleepy and confused, and she may need assistance," I said. "What assistance?" she asked. I explained about the robe to her. She shook her head. "Then you can help her put it on," she said. "I think you should do that," I said a little nervously. She looked at me and then started laughing out loud. "You haven't seen her change yet?" she asked, still giggling. "Jerry, don't ever change," she said with a smile. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Jerry, Sandy has liked you since the day you saved us from those bad situations. She always said that if she found the right person, it would be you. Everywhere we've been, things have been tough. Everyone we meet wants something in return for help. No one does anything nice anymore. And for women, it's even harder. Every place we've been before this has been the same. If we wanted food or somewhere to stay, we had to pay a lot for it. Often, they wanted more than just money." I shook my head. We always stayed away from that when we could, she said. Sandy hasn't had to do that much, maybe 3 or 4 times in total. I'm sorry, I replied. I didn't really think about it like that. No, Jerry, you're missing my point, she said. There are 2 things I want to say. First, I thought you and Sandy would have grown closer by now. You saved us. If it wasn't for you, we might be gone or worse. Then you helped her with that assignment about shooting. You gave her a chance to do what she loves most. So I figured you 2 might have gotten together after that. My second point is easier to see and kind of funny. I've already told you Sandy cares about you. Have you noticed how she talks to you? She gets really close, more than with anyone else. She wants you to notice her. I think that for the first time, Sandy really wants to connect with someone. So, I just kind of thought that you 2 had... Well, we're not married yet, I said. And I'm still married to... That made everyone laugh even harder. Sandy moved in the tub when she heard her mom laugh but didn't wake up. Jerry, the world isn't like that anymore, she said. Maybe it is for us here in our nice space, but only because we believe in the rules. No one can truly enforce them. And even if they could, Dana hurt you very badly. Everyone knows at camp now. No one would judge you for wanting to be with someone else. I get that, I said. But if we want our rules and laws to matter, the people who make them and enforce them need to follow them too. If not, they don't mean anything. And what? She asked with a smile. If I did anything with Sandy before my divorce, people might think less of her, and I wouldn't want that. Sandy is just... She tilted her head and looked at me. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, she's unique, I replied. Her mom's smile grew wider. She's hungry, said Sandy. Where's my robe? I stepped out of the room and her mom shook her head. I kept myself busy by organizing the food. I took another plate from the kitchen cabinet. I split the food onto 3 plates instead of just 2. I just couldn't bring myself to cut the cake, though. A little while later, Sandy came out wearing her robe. I was surprised. I had always appreciated seeing Dana fresh from the bath in her robe, but this felt different. Sandy's damp blonde hair fell over her shoulders, and I was taken aback. She had tied her robe snugly, which did little to lessen my feelings. I noticed more of her form in the V of the robe than I had ever seen with Dana. Sandy looked even more mature than I had imagined, and it made me feel a bit overwhelmed. The robe hugged her small waist and then flowed outwards nicely. And then it happened. The smile reappeared, stronger than ever. It felt like we were the only 2 people in the room. If someone asked me years later when I realized I cared for Sandy as much as she cared for me, it wouldn't be during that tense moment with the Rabs. It would be now. Sandy stood by the table, her hair damp, wearing a cozy towel robe that wrapped around her. She gave me a look that conveyed everything about her warmth and connection. Jerry, you didn't need to do that, her mom said. I brought this food for you 2. I'll probably eat with my girls. She looked at me in a way that made me think I was missing something about how she said, my girls. Well, it's a lot of work to cook for all of us, I replied. You should sit down and enjoy it sometimes. In the last few days, Sandy and I hadn't had much time together because of everything going on. We all gathered around the table to eat, and suddenly Sandy's mom started laughing again. What's so funny? I asked. Remember I told you that everyone wants something for everything these days? She replied. I nodded. Well, I'll share the joke if you give me one of those nice robes. Do you want the soft one or the fancy one? I asked. Her eyes widened. You have a fancy one? She asked. Real fancy, not something fake? Yes, I said. It was from a good store. What's fancy? Asked Sandy, cutting a piece of her meat. It's the softest, smoothest material ever, her mom said. It feels so nice against your skin that you... Why didn't I get one? Sandy asked. I'll keep one for you for after we're older. I smiled. That might be an issue for him right now, her mom said with a grin. Why? Asked Sandy, looking confused. Okay, I said, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. You can choose any robe you like. All right, her mom said. You just mentioned how we haven't spent much time together since I stopped cooking. But truthfully, we get along better now, and we're both happier since I quit. Sandy's smile faded as her mother continued laughing. I wasn't that bad, Mom. I just wasn't focusing on cooking, she replied. Her mom laughed so hard that her face turned red. Jerry, Remember that day you came to pick her up? We had her helping people find their seats like they do in fancy restaurants. There's no reason for that since people can sit wherever they want. We just had her do it to keep her from cooking. The girl can't even boil water without burning the pot." Seeing that her daughter was getting upset, she quickly changed the topic. "So, where's my robe? I want to take it with me," she said. "In the cabinet along the back wall of the bathroom," I said. She got up and went back into the bathroom. She moved quickly for someone older. I was surprised. "Can I have more than one?" she suddenly called from the bathroom. "Yes," I shouted back, looking at Sandy. "Can I have 6? She asked. "I guess," I replied. "Why does she need 6 robes?" I asked Sandy quietly. "My mom loves the cooking staff," Sandy smiled. "She calls them her girls. I guess she wants 1 robe for each woman. You won't have to worry about food again. They will all take care of you. I might have to keep an eye on 1 or 2 of them." After Sandy's mom left, I helped her sit on the sofa and gave her a massage, just like the nurse in the med center suggested. It was a bit challenging in more ways than one. As I massaged her tired muscles, it was hard to resist the urge to linger. I worked lotion into her sore spots, making her relax and sigh. "Your hands feel so nice," she said softly. "Do you want me to pull my robe down so you can see better?" she asked. As I massaged her shoulders, she turned her head to look at me. I paused to grab more lotion, and she lifted her upper body off the cushions to see me. In that moment, I realized that her gaze was inviting. I returned to the sofa with a handful of lotion and continued massaging her back. When I reached the small of her back, she stopped me. Then, without hesitation, she adjusted her robe and laid back down, as if it was completely normal for her to be so comfortable in front of me. I gently worked on her lower back, and she let out soft sounds of relaxation. I carefully touched her bruised hip to help with healing. I couldn't help but be curious about her. My first thought was to do everything I could to get Jerry to sit down with me so we could talk. We had a lot of history together, and I believed he still cared about me. I just needed to help him get past his anger so we could find that bond again. I also knew I had to keep some distance from Diego. Even though we were supposed to be working together, Jerry seeing me with Diego would only make things harder. So for the first few days, I waited outside our house like a shadow. I couldn't believe my eyes. Not only had Jerry invited that girl into my home, but she was also tending to my garden and my plants. I was so angry I could hardly think. Back in the good old days, there was a term for computer parts that you could just plug in, and they would work right away. They called those extra devices plug and play. Jerry acted like that girl was plug and play, too, because he just added her to his life, and she started taking my place. This made me dislike her even more. I hated everything about her, from her changing blonde hair to her big chest. But the thing I disliked most was how her face lit up every time he was near. She appeared overly cheerful about a guy that anyone could see wasn't meant for her. I watched them for 2 whole days, and they were almost always together. I even wondered if they went to the bathroom at the same time. I noticed something strange about her, too. She seemed to enjoy working. Her job was the most boring one around, but she treated it like it was something special. She even went to that place on the wall when she didn't have to. From the rumors I heard, they had given her some time off. It seems that when I accidentally knocked that girl off the wall, she hurt her hip and was walking with a little limp, but she still showed up to work at the wall like usual. When I first heard she was coming back, I thought it might be my chance to talk to her, but it turned out differently. Jerry went to the wall with her, and they sat together, chatting about who knows what. After that, I noticed everyone in town started treating me like I was a bad person. They seemed to ignore me. I had gotten used to everyone knowing me and saying hello, so it felt strange and lonely. I used to walk into the kitchen and grab whatever I wanted without a second thought. Normally, I could just walk into the cooking area and tell the older women what I wanted to eat, and they would happily make it for me. But now things felt different. They would smile at me and ask me to share stories about our adventures. They even suggested things for Jerry and me to look for while we were out exploring. It felt a bit like being a celebrity. I didn't think much of it until it was gone. For 2 days, I kept bumping into people because they didn't feel the need to move aside for me anymore. The biggest surprise came when I walked into the cooking area and asked if someone could make me a hamburger. Everyone just started laughing. Sandy's mom, Elizabeth, was too busy to talk to me. One of the other cooks said they were making lunch for over 100 people, and they couldn't take time for special requests. She told me lunch would be ready in about an hour, so I wouldn't go hungry. I was surprised. It made me realize once more how much I had enjoyed time spent with Jerry. I also saw that besides my issues with Jerry, I had another big problem to think about. Diego was right. I needed to change what I expected from people because they seemed to really dislike me. It looked like Jerry could do whatever he wanted, but I couldn't even get away with a small mistake. If these people had to decide if I should be kicked out, I would probably be gone. I went to find Diego. I didn't talk to him because I liked him. I did it because I needed someone to chat with. Even someone like me needed a friend. It seemed like Diego was doing better than I was. At first, the town didn't think much of him, so there wasn't much further he could fall. I had started as the town's favorite person, but now it felt like I had dropped from a great height. Being the town's favorite meant that everyone expected me to be perfect. Because of two small mistakes, one of which I felt bad about, I had become the only person in town people liked less than Diego. What should I do? I asked him. I'm trying really hard to make these people like me, he said with a smirk. You know what? It will be much easier for you. They used to adore you, so getting them to like you again will be simple. For me, it feels like an uphill struggle. It will take a long time for them to trust me. As he said this, I could hear a hint of sadness in his voice. It was like for the first time Diego felt sorry for what he had done. The first thing you need to do is get Sandy to forgive you, he advised. No way, I almost yelled back. I'm not going to charm that man to make things better, I said firmly. Then we might get kicked out of this town, he replied, his tone strong. There has to be another way, I complained. You need to make things right with your husband, he advised. Right now, he's really upset with you. He feels like you betrayed him after all this time together. It might be easier to get Sandy to forgive you since you two don't have much of a past, and you can connect with her as a friend. She's been running around town looking happy, plus, she's not the kind of person who holds on to anger for too long. If you can get her to forgive you, it could help make Jerry less upset with you. Once you get him to listen, maybe we both have a chance to stay here. He was right, even if I didn't want to admit it. I've been doing tough jobs around town to gain their trust, he said. This really matters to you, doesn't it? I asked. He nodded. I'm not foolish, he said. This is a great place. They have strong walls to keep them safe. Their fighters are skilled and well prepared. I don't think this town will fall. Our chances of staying alive here are really good. Staying alive is my top priority. Maybe it's time for me to settle down and do something meaningful. With time running out before the four of us had to meet with Sven to discuss our situation, I started to track my rival. Honestly, I didn't want to come face to face with her. The Rabs beyond the wall didn't seem to want to leave. Every day there were fewer of them, but it felt like a group of sharks waiting near a cruise ship for scraps. They lingered outside, hoping the gate would open or someone would come out. My moment arrived the morning before our planned meeting. I watched, trying hard to keep my breakfast down as she and my husband sat on the walkway. They kept touching each other, which made me even angrier just thinking about what they might be doing at night in our home. They even leaned their weapons against the wall together. It felt awful to see him move on so quickly. Then, one of the other guys on guard went up the ladder and talked to Jerry. Jerry climbed down the ladder and followed him, leaving Sandy alone. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I hurried across the square to the wall and climbed the ladder. When she saw me, her expression turned cold. She loosened the strap on the holster where she kept her gun. But she didn't even look at the big sniper rifle she valued so much. That felt like an insult. It was like she decided I wasn't worth using the big weapon against. I raised both hands as I got closer to her. Sandy, I don't want to cause any trouble, I said. I just want to talk. I don't think we have anything to say to each other, she replied. You probably don't remember, but the last time we were together, you tried to hurt me. That's exactly why I'm here, I said. I wanted to say I'm sorry for that. I really hope you can forgive me. Just saying those words felt heavy, like a punch in the stomach. They probably sounded insincere too, because her expression didn't change. Sandy, it was never just about you and me, I said earnestly. We really don't know each other at all. I think if things were different, we could have been great friends. It's just this bad situation that makes us clash. Her face showed a little bit of interest after I said that. Sandy, we're almost the same age. I'm 24. How old are you? I asked. 23, she replied carefully. You and I are the only women here who are under 30, I told her. I believe we would have been friends if things were different. Honestly, if we were in each other's shoes, I think you would feel the same way. She shook her head like she didn't agree. Oh, yes, you would have, I grinned, and her expression softened a little. You like Jerry, right? Imagine if you and he had been together for 5 years and then a new girl suddenly comes in and starts talking to him. On top of that, you both were having a tough time because you did something really foolish. Her expression became serious. I could tell she was thinking about what I had just said. Think about it this way, I continued. Imagine you spent days trying to get him to talk to you, but he just wouldn't. I explained, that's how Jerry is when he's feeling hurt or upset. He shuts himself away. I care about him more than anything, so you can picture how I felt when he wouldn't talk to me. Yet there he was, complimenting another woman in front of everyone. When he called you his girl, it really hurt me, Sandy. The second time he said it, I was filled with jealousy. Sandy, he means everything to me. She looked at me with concern. Sandy, I don't hold any grudges about what you and he may have, but you can't expect me to forget everything we've built over the last 5 years. There are lots of good guys around here. I can help you find one, and I don't need your help, she replied. I'm happy with the one I have. If it's so easy to find a good guy, then why are you still with that guy who hurt people? Diego and I aren't together, I said quickly. That was a mistake, and you're the luckiest woman I know, she interrupted. We live in a world where one tiny mistake can create challenges. You keep making missteps, but you're still here. Everyone knows what happened to you. That makes us different. I just want one man who loves me and stays with me. I wouldn't want to look for someone else. You did, and now you have to deal with it. Move on and accept it. By the time she finished, I was even angrier than before. I had tried to talk to her nicely, apologized, and even offered to help her find someone. She just took all that and threw it back in my face. I glared at her and she just smiled. Dana, she said, still smiling at me, you can be as mad as you want. You've tried to hurt me before. I didn't see it coming then, but now I'll always be careful around you. If you come after me again, I'll be ready. Enjoy your day. She kept watching me as I went down the ladder and walked away. I found Diego waiting for lunch. I spoke to her, I said, anger evident in my voice. How did it go? He asked. I basically crawled and begged her to forgive me, and she threw it back at me, I said with frustration. I thought I had her on my side. Let me guess, he replied. Instead of just saying sorry like I told you, you tried to ask her for Jerry back too, right? I nodded, and he shook his head. Too much too soon, he said. I told you to focus on getting her to forgive you first. I also mentioned that you should lower your hopes. It's better to stay here and come up with a plan to win your guy back than to get thrown out. It's tough out there. We need a new idea, I said. I'm so stressed that I can't think straight. This plan could have worked if you had managed it differently, he said confidently. I was just trying to figure out how to get her away from my husband, I replied. Every time I close my eyes, I see him with her. And it drives me crazy. I feel so angry. You probably shouldn't say things like that, he whispered. Remember, you are talking about someone who is very skilled and can defend herself in ways you might not even see coming. You should also remember that she hasn't just taken your place with your husband, but also as the town's favorite. What are you trying to say? I yelled, feeling angry. I'm saying two things, he replied, speaking quietly again. First, if she were to confront you, she could likely get away with it. Everyone watching us now heard you talk about wanting to challenge her. You've even tried it before. I doubt anyone here would think she wouldn't have a good reason, and she knows how to stand her ground. Since you've messed up our plan, you should keep a low profile. Dana, you're not a fighter. You're good at spotting things. I've heard you were great at it, but if she chooses to go after you, you could be in a difficult position. I grumbled, thinking about what he had just said. And the second thing is, this is all in your head, he added. What do you mean it's all in my head? I asked. This is all very real. Are you telling me that the tall blonde girl with balloons in her shirt, who is so close to my guy, isn't real? Because if you can show me that, I would do anything for you." "Well, first, she's not really that tall, Dana. She's just taller than you. And she's not skinny. She has a nice shape. You always talk about her because you're feeling insecure." "I do have my own attributes," I said sharply. "They just aren't exaggerated like hers. She's just not my type. I don't see how anyone could like her." "I'm sure there are girls who look at you and say the same thing," he replied. "Anyway, they aren't doing anything together. That's just in your head." My eyes must have gone wide. "That's why she was so mad at me," I said with a smile. "Even with her figure, she hasn't won him over yet." "I still have a chance," he said, stopping in front of me with a serious look. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I've been seeing one of the women who works in the garden. Her sister cooks in the kitchen," he explained. "The kitchen staff is planning a big party for their wedding. They say she's ready, but he wants to wait until he deals with you before he marries her. The other women think it's so romantic. You should hear what they're talking about." "Don't most of the women from the garden and farm gain weight?" I asked. He looked down, and I couldn't help but laugh. I felt better knowing my husband wasn't with someone who fit a perfect ideal. "You're a mess," I said. "In a world where so many people are hungry, you're with someone who's not in shape." "I take what I can get," he replied sharply. "Trust me, she's better than you." I stopped laughing then. Diego got up and stepped away from me. He looked around to check if anyone could hear us. "Are you serious?" he whispered angrily. "Being with you was the worst choice I ever made. Your husband still wants to hurt me. If anyone even hinted that we were close again, he would not hesitate to come after me. I got sick the other day, and I was so worried it was something serious. Anita went to Sven and asked him to go to the medical tent and get me some medicine. Sven, the leader of the town, had to keep it quiet because he doesn't want your husband angry at him." I chuckled thinking about it because Diego still wasn't feeling better, and it had been almost a week. "I wouldn't even think about being with you," he said. I was surprised. Now that I had a moment to reflect, he was right. It wasn't a good idea. But I had never experienced someone declining my advances before, and it stung. I turned and walked away, feeling frustrated. Let him go find someone else. I looked across the area and saw Sandy still sitting on the wall, gazing out. I also noticed Jerry squatting in front of his Mustang with a bucket of water and cleaning tools. I walked up to him and stood behind him. Even though I tried to be quiet, he sensed my presence. "What do you want, Dana?" he asked. I was taken aback that he recognized me. "I didn't come here to bother you," I said softly. "We'll talk tomorrow with Sven and the others," he replied. "I know that, Jerry," I answered. "I just wanted to ask if I could get some of my clothes I left behind." I wasn't being entirely truthful. I desired him so much it was hard not to rush towards him. He dropped his sponge and stood up. He nodded toward the wall, adjusting his shirt and pants. I felt a chill as I realized that even at that moment, Sandy probably had her rifle aimed in my direction. "Let's go," he said coolly. "We should just get this over with." We walked toward the house. It was strange to be back in my home after just a week and see how different everything was. Even Jerry's weapon closet had changed. Instead of his swords and other tools lying around, someone had built shelves on the walls and organized everything. The closet was now shared too. The wall opposite Jerry's swords and axes was filled with rifles, pistols, and boxes of ammunition. "I put all of your things in bags," he said. He turned to grab the bags, and my position changed. After a moment, he called out to me. "Dana, where are you?" he asked. "In here," I replied. He entered the room we used to share and found me lying on the bed. "I noticed that Sandy sleeps in the guest room," I said. "You can dislike someone. You can love someone deeply, but you can never really know who they are." "But Jerry, I've made a mistake, and I promise I won't do it again," I said. "Dana, you hurt me," he replied. "You had your chance, and now it's time to let someone else have theirs." "Jerry, you don't understand. It was not about love. It was just a mistake, and there's a reason for it," I explained. "Sure, you wanted him the moment you saw him," he said. "It felt special. It was like connection at first sight, right? Well, now you have him, so please just leave my house and let me be." "But," I started to argue. Jerry just turned away and left the room. The next day, I had a meeting with Sven. I was really nervous. We all gathered at Sven's home. His wife had made some snacks and drinks for us. We went into a small, quiet room with a table and chairs set up around it. Sven sat down and smiled as each couple chose a side. "Looks like I've done my job," he said. I felt confused by his words. "By the way you all are sitting, it's clear how this will go," he added. I glanced around and saw that Diego and I were next to each other, while Jerry and Sandy were holding hands across the table. Diego and I were as far apart as the table allowed. "No way," I replied. "I came here to save my marriage, and we won't leave until we fix this." "It seems pretty clear to me," Sandy said. "All right, let's go through this step by step," Sven suggested. "Diego, when you first came here, I gave you a week to get settled. In those first few days, we had problems with you trying to pressure women. There were also thefts. Then there was the issue with Dana. Since then, you've done many difficult tasks and handled them well. I've even had a couple of people speak up for you. If we set aside what happened with Dana, I would think about letting you stay longer with us, but with some conditions. So, let's focus on two important things. We'll wait to discuss those until we take care of the other matters. Dana, you're adding a lot of stress to me and the community. First, because of what happened with Diego, and second, he shook his head. Let's address these issues one at a time, he stated. There are different kinds of rules or laws here. The first thing we need to consider is moral beliefs. Each community has its own views on what is right and wrong. Did you know that most couples here aren't married? We don't make marriage a requirement. It's not a law. Dana, I married you and Jerry not because it was legally needed, but because both of you asked me to. You wanted to feel that you were united in a special way. If you both don't want to be together anymore, you don't need me to break a connection that was made by your feelings. I saw Sandy and Jerry smiling. Wait a minute, I said as I stood up. Don't I get to say something? Can I explain? Okay, go ahead, he replied. I know everyone thinks what happened was because of my desire or my selfishness. That's not true. Many things played a part. It all started before Diego came to town. Jerry and I were still the happy couple we always were. One night, Sandy came over to our house and started flirting with Jerry right in front of me. She smiled as I spoke. Is that true, Sandy? Sven asked. Yes, she replied. I had just moved to town and didn't know if she was his sister or cousin or what. Plus, many couples today live together but also see other people. I found him attractive. He had saved both my life and my mom's and brought us here. But I didn't even give him a gesture of affection. Is that true, Jerry? Asked Sven. Yes, it is, Jerry replied. There are many nice women in town. Sandy is beautiful, but looks alone aren't enough for me to fall for someone. I thought Sandy was nice, but I would never choose her over Dana or anyone else. I loved Dana. We were meant to be together. And that's how it should still be, I shouted. Then the next day, Diego showed up in town, I continued. He and Jerry had a disagreement by the gate, and he looked at me. He kept giving me those looks that suggested he wanted to connect. I was still upset about Sandy's attention towards Jerry, so I decided to make Jerry feel uneasy. I didn't know how I would do that, but Diego and fate helped me. I literally ran into him on the street not long after. For a long time, there was something important I hadn't told you, Jerry. It was something that used to feel normal, but now it seems like a distant dream. I really wanted us to have a family. So when Diego started talking about his experiences, an idea came to me. If Diego could help me start a family, we could... I looked around and saw everyone's eyes widen. They were all staring at me in surprise. Even Sven, who usually tried to stay neutral, looked shocked. What? I asked. Having a family would be good for our whole community, not just for me. So your real plan was to involve me in raising another man's child as if it was ours, Jerry said, his voice rising. He stood up and leaned over the table, clearly upset. Then he shook his head and sat back down. You know, Dana, I guess I must be foolish. For a long time, I kept waiting to hear a story about how you were misled into turning against me. I wanted to believe that all the time we shared meant something and wasn't just wasted. But like I said before, you can't really know someone else. No matter how this ends, I'm finished with you. You're not different from the others. You're just a figure, wandering around and responding to what you feel without real thought behind it. He shook his head again, and that woman leaned in to offer her support. Sven decided to change the topic. And you, Diego, it seems like this was just another way for you to handle things, right? No, sir, Diego replied. I feel ashamed, but I am accustomed to doing whatever it takes to survive. I wanted to stay here, so I would do anything to make that happen. I was really in a tough spot. I knew you were neutral about me, but Jerry really didn't like me. So I had to find a way to earn his trust. I knew he had a soft spot back then, just like he does now. Jerry stood up, upset. "Let's go outside so you can show me this soft spot," he said sharply. "Not that kind of soft spot, Jerry," Diego replied. "Besides, you could easily overpower me. I'm still not moving fast after our last encounter. You have the same vulnerability now that you had back then. The only change is who it is. When I first got here, Dana was your point of concern. It was clear you would do anything for her. I thought that if I helped her or had something she needed, you might forgive me for my past actions. I'm sorry for that. I'm also sorry for how I approached our issue by the wall. I was just desperate and not used to thinking about anyone but myself." Everyone stayed quiet for a while after that. Then Sven turned to Jerry. "All right," Jerry said angrily. "He can stay, but only for a trial period." "I guess if I were in his place, I might have done some of those things too. But that doesn't excuse her," he said, pointing at me. "I want to end this, and I don't want to see her ever again," he said with anger. "Jerry, no!" I yelled. "You have to forgive me. Why can you let him go but not me? It's that little blonde girl, isn't it? I should have resolved things with her the moment I saw her." "Diego isn't the one who promised to be true to me, Dana," Jerry said. "Diego isn't the person I lived with and cared for 5 miserable years, only to have you betray me. Get lost, Dana. If you even glance at her the wrong way, I'll make sure you regret it." Jerry reached for his sword, but quickly remembered he had left it at home because weapons weren't allowed in meetings. In that moment, I understood that I had lost him for good, and someone was going to pay for my loss. "Okay, let's all take a breather," said Sven. "We have a problem. I need to find a way to fix this." He glanced at the people seated around the table. "Diego, you said you want to stay here," he said thoughtfully. "I need you to help me with something. We have a group in the area they used to call the River Walk that we trade with often. Dana knows the way there because she's been with Jerry several times." "So, you're going to send me to them?" Diego asked, looking sad. "Well, I guess it's a new beginning and—" "No," Sven replied. "You got it wrong. This is not just a trip, it's a mission for you. I want you to take a load of supplies to Riverwalk and bring back what they want to trade with us. You will come back to us. Dana won't." My heart raced when I heard that. "What are you saying, Sven?" I shouted. "I've been here much longer than he has. Don't you remember? I was the one who was tricked. I'm the one being hurt here." "Dana, this isn't about you and him," Sven said. "You tried to hurt someone in our group. You did it in a terrible way. You pushed her when she wasn't looking. This was someone who never did anything to you. No one will trust you again. I won't tell the people at Riverwalk about what you did. You'll get, as Diego put it, a fresh start there and—" "How will I get a fresh start?" I complained. "Everyone knows that Jerry and I are together. If I go there alone, the first thing they'll ask is where Jerry is and why we're not together." Suddenly, a memory came to me. I turned to Jerry. "Do you remember what you said to me last week?" I asked. "That feels like ages ago," he replied. "Good luck with your life." "Thanks a lot, Jerry," I said. "Thanks to all of you." "You'll never get another chance," he said with a smirk. I pushed the doors open and stepped out of the room. Jerry, in the next few days, the number of Rabs outside the walls became smaller. They wandered off or fought with each other. We talked a lot about what to do with the many dead bodies lying around. We decided to send groups to burn them. We weren't sure if burying them would affect the water or the ground. For me, it was a very tense time. I knew this wedding would be a big occasion. Almost everyone in town was excited about it. The only person who wasn't happy was the one I once loved most but now found hard to be near. I felt a little restless, but luckily I got a chance to take my mind off things. One morning, Sven came to meet me and Jesse at the wall. He told us that we had received a call on the radio. One of our trucks full of supplies was nearby but noticed a lot of Rabs around the complex. We worried about whether it would be safe to open the door and get the truck inside. "What do you think?" Sven asked. "Finally a chance to get back to action," I replied. "What do you have in mind?" Sven questioned. I shared my plan with him. He looked at me like I was a bit out there, but nodded. "Are you okay working with Dana one more time?" he asked. "Nope," I said. I have someone else in mind. Things are going to move too fast for that. I went back to the house and gently woke Sandy. As she opened her eyes and saw me, she smiled. I knew you couldn't wait until tomorrow after the wedding, she teased. Come on in, she said, inviting me closer. I just want to say I'm not like your ex. I don't have the same kind of past. But I really want you to be with me. I'll do anything for you. Keep that in mind, I said. First, you need to get ready so we can go to work. Plus, you'll need to pick a few tools that you think will help us with what we're doing. We're going fishing, I said with a grin. Jerry, there isn't any water nearby, she said, looking puzzled. We're not fishing for fish, I explained. We're going after crabs. What are we going to use as bait? She asked. Me, I said with a smile. An hour later, just as the sun began to rise, I told Sven to call the truck and let the driver know to come over slowly. I knew they had to stay hidden from the crabs around the area, which would take some time for them to get close enough for our plan. Jesse was still shaking his head as he looked at me. You're out of your mind, he said. What on earth are you wearing? Shouldn't you be wearing your leather jacket? I just smiled at him. Jess, I've wanted to try this for a while, I said as I rolled up my sleeve. Where did you get that? He asked. Is there more? I found it on my last trip, I said. That's why I wanted to go back to that museum replica store. They have swords and axes ready for battle, and they had different kinds of chainmail. This is aluminum micromail. It's made of tiny links of aluminum. It's really light and flexible. It's pretty much safe from rab. If I had gloves and a helmet made of it, I could walk around and even let them approach me without worry. Right now, I only have 2 shirts and 2 pairs of leggings made of it. Where's the other shirt and leggings? He asked. I pointed to Sandy. I kind of expected that, he said with a chuckle. You can't blame a guy for trying. Jesse had 6 men who would be helping him. If everything went as planned, they would have very little to do. Jesse and his team were going from door to door, making sure everyone in town was safely at home. Except for the cooks who were always up very early to prepare breakfast, almost everyone else was still asleep. Sandy and I got into my car to wait for the signal. 3 men stood beside my car in front of the big gate. Jesse went up on the walkway above the gate to keep watch. On the other side of the complex, facing the gate, Roy Thomas and a few of his men stood at a small guardhouse. This guardhouse was set up with big speakers. We had a generator nearby to power the speakers. Jesse waved a flashlight to get Roy's attention, and Roy turned on the music through the big speakers. The song playing was one I really liked. I had shared it with Roy. It was an old song from the 1980s, long before I was born. It was created by an English band called Grim Reaper, back when England was still together. The song was a fun, fast tune called Rock You to Hell. The song played really loudly. It grabbed the attention of all the rabs near the building. They began to move away from the gate and toward the back of the complex. As the rabs gathered there, the gate opened, and Jesse crossed himself and then gave me a thumbs up. I pressed down on the gas and my Mustang, running in electric mode, sped quickly out of the gate, which closed right behind us. I drove around the complex at a slower speed, staying about 50 yards away. As soon as the gate shut, Roy saw my Mustang and turned off the speakers. I turned on the speakers we had set up in the trunk of the Mustang. The sound was quieter, but it was still very loud, playing the same song. The rabs outside the wall noticed us and began to follow the Mustang as I drove away from the area. I had to go slowly so they would stay behind me, but fast enough to keep a good distance. This way, Sandy could get ready in her spot. When I reached the place I aimed for, the fastest 8 or 10 of them were about 50 or 60 yards away. I opened the door and helped Sandy climb up into the big tree we had parked under. "Is this how all our outings will be?" she asked, giving me a quick gesture of affection before scrambling up to safety in the branches. We believed the rabs couldn't do tricky things like climbing, so she should be pretty safe there. I knew that even if they noticed her, they wouldn't be smart enough to understand that if she aimed her gun at them, it meant trouble. That thought barely crossed my mind when the first group of enemies, the rabs, came at me. I jumped over the front of my car, forcing the 3 of them to go around it. This helped me face them one at a time. The first guy was really big and looked angry, yelling as he came closer. I took him out quickly with a strong hit from my mace to his head. I quickly glanced behind me and saw another one coming my way. Then, out of nowhere, his head burst as Sandy shot him from above. "Don't get too confident," I heard her voice through my earpiece. Keeping you safe is my job. Dana, I sprang to my feet faster than I ever had before. As I looked around in the dark, I suddenly understood why. All around the neighborhood, I heard Jerry's favorite loud song. It was one of those music tracks from the 80s with lots of noisy guitar and shouting. He loved those songs, but this one was special to him. He always said he wanted it to play during his last big moment. I quickly put on a sweatshirt and jeans and rushed out of the dorm where I had been staying. I couldn't believe I had to share a room with a bunch of older women while that blonde man was at my house, taking my husband away. I dashed out into the street and saw several people coming out of their homes, all trying to find out what was happening. It seemed like my mind had forgotten that I really didn't like Jerry. The day before, he had picked that tall blonde girl instead of me, and now I might have to leave town for trying to hurt her. Luckily, most people in the town were acting without understanding what was happening. Even though they were guiding everyone back inside for safety, the security team didn't stop me and let me pass through. I got to the gate and realized the music had gotten quieter and was now coming from the other way. I was so used to going toward the gate that I just followed my routine. "Jesse, what is happening?" I shouted. "Get back to where you're staying," he replied. "Jesse, where's Jerry?" I asked. He just shook his head. "Go to the back guard tower," he told me. I started running. Jesse's expression made it clear that something was wrong. He had sent Jerry and me on scouting trips for years, but this time he seemed genuinely worried. I believe that was the only reason he told me what was happening, so I could take one last look at Jerry just in case. I ran as fast as I could to the back guard tower without anyone stopping me. I climbed the ladder and saw Sven and Roy standing on the walkway. In the distance, I spotted Jerry's car. It was at least 150 to 200 yards away, and I could hear music coming from it. All the Rabs that had been near our place were moving toward the car, some running, some walking, and others shuffling or crawling. I felt a chill run through me, and tears started to fall as I realized what was happening. I grabbed Sven by the throat and shook him. "What is he doing out there?" I yelled. Roy had to hold me back before I pushed the old man off the wall. Did they not see that the Mustang wasn't going to keep him safe? All the Rabs had to do was break the windows and then they could reach Jerry. I tried to reach for Sven again, but Jerry wasn't even in the car. He stood outside the car. I quickly grabbed the binoculars from the shelf and focused them on him. Jerry was in his element. He jumped and spun, swinging his mace and knocking down limbs. I lowered the binoculars and glared at Sven. When I picked them up again, I saw Diego had climbed up next to us. "It was his idea," said Sven. "We needed something to draw the Rabs away from the gate so both trucks could get in safely. He won't be out there for long, but we really need those supplies. We're very low on food, fuel, and other crucial things." "You let him go out there by himself?" I snapped. "You're all such cowards." "It was his plan," replied Sven. "We needed almost all the fighters at the gate just in case any of the Rabs didn't fall for it and tried to get into the complex. If just one of those guys gets in here, we are done for. If you needed every fighter available," started Diego. "You said it yourself yesterday," Sven replied. "You're still having trouble moving and you sent him out there without anyone to help him," I shouted. "Where are the shooters?" "Dana, who do we have that can shoot that far?" Sven asked. "What about Barbie?" I yelled at him. "What about his girlfriend? She should be on that wall right now." "Dana, that isn't really possible," Sven said. "Why not?" I insisted. He took the binoculars from Diego and handed them to me. "Look at him closely," Sven said softly. "If you watch carefully, you'll see that Rabs around him are dropping without him even touching them. Now look up into the tree, maybe 10 feet up." That's when I saw her for the first time. Sandy was sitting in the tree behind him. She had a lever-action rifle and was shooting with precision. At that moment, I knew I had truly been replaced. When I was with Jerry, I had to stay a distance away and just tell him over the radio if anyone was coming. Sandy went right into the action with him and took out anyone in her way. She was much better suited for being his partner than I ever was. I could hear Roy talking into his radio. "From what I see, we're safe back here. Everyone is heading towards Jerry and Sandy. Bring them in, and I'll prepare Team 2, he said. I watched as two guys near the ladder started to get ready when Roy signaled them. Across the area, the big gate opened, and a truck drove in. The gate remained open, and just a few seconds later, a second truck followed. Jesse and his group, which included some fighters and 3 shooters on the wall, made sure that no Rabs got inside. "All clear!" someone shouted through Roy's radio. Roy shot a flare into the sky. It grabbed the attention of many Rabs near Jerry, but he kept fighting. Sandy took aim and shot several Rabs nearby. Then, he turned off the music that had been blaring from his car. A few seconds later, Roy started the music again, this time really loud from the big speakers. Some Rabs at the back of the group turned to look at the wall. Jerry saw this chance and quickly climbed up into a tree, reaching the lower branches. When the Rabs near him noticed they couldn't reach him, they lost interest and moved on. The 2 men near Roy used ropes to lower themselves to the ground and ran towards the group of Rabs. As the Rabs turned to chase them, they completely forgot about Jerry. I watched as Jerry jumped down from the tree and then helped Sandy down, too. They got into his car and drove toward the main gate. The Mustang moved quickly and quietly. Jerry and Sandy were safe inside before the guards even reached the back tower. The 2 men outside climbed back up their ropes, and everything returned to normal with no one hurt. Together, Jerry and Sandy had really cut down the number of guards. When the gate closed, everyone in the complex, including the truck teams, rushed to Jerry and Sandy. It felt like a scene from a movie. She held a rifle in one hand and his hand tightly with the other, as if she would never let go. He had some spray for protection in one hand and held her hand in the other. As the crowd cheered and reached out to touch them, I felt a wave of emotion. It took a while for the cheering to calm down, and one thought kept going through my mind. It should have been me with him. All those cheers and praises should have been for me. They should have been mine if that dishonest, awful woman hadn't taken my husband away from me. The whole town kept talking about the wedding happening the next day. I was really angry. I even heard some people wonder why Jerry and I hadn't had a big wedding. That made me smile until someone said that he didn't love me as much as he loved Sandy. They went on to say that I was cute, but Sandy was beautiful. I had disliked Sandy from the first moment I saw her, but that morning, seeing people who used to be my good friends or even like family treat her like a queen while ignoring me, made me realize I wanted to get back at her. Even that fool Diego was busy flattering her. He didn't seem to notice how they were making both of us feel like outsiders. To do something serious about it, I needed to help Diego see the truth. I had a plan to do just that. It wasn't very nice, but I felt he deserved it. He messed up my life here, so I thought he should get the same back. I walked over to the garden and saw Lana. She was pulling weeds around the tomato plants. I asked her if she needed help. She just shrugged. "You've never worked in the garden before," she said. "It's not too hard, but being on your knees for a while can be tough on your body." "I just needed something to do," I told her. "I'm trying to forget about the big wedding tomorrow. I planned to spend the whole day with Diego, but he got tired, so we're taking a break." Her eyes got really big. "Men just can't keep going like we do," I said, "no matter how strong they are. But you know that, right?" She looked everywhere but at me. Lana, who was more of a caretaker, felt awkward talking about relationships. After a little while of pulling weeds from the ground, trying to keep them from smothering the plants, I sighed loudly. "Whew," I said. "How can you do this for so long? I need a break." I stood up and walked towards my dorm. On my way, I spotted Diego and pulled him along with me. "What are you doing?" I asked, smiling at him. While Diego talked about learning to drive the truck and read the map for our trip, I looked around. Lana had disappeared from the garden. I had a good idea of where she might be. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "The dorms," I replied playfully. "There's something else we need to do to get ready for our trip." "I'm not helping you take anything from that room," he said with a mock glare. It seems like the people with a past always act the most serious, I thought. "We're not going to take anything," I said, grabbing his arm again. "I have to get used to that new thing for us to have fun together on our trip. You will need to help me feel comfortable." "But," he said, stopping right in the middle of the street. "But what?" I asked. "Don't you like the thought of being close to me whenever you want, as much as you want while we're traveling?" "But, he said, looking around. "That's over," I said. "Jerry and I are no longer together. He doesn't mind if you and I become closer. He's with Sandy now, and honestly, maybe they are good for each other. They're both really into their hobbies and stuff. I've decided to let it all go and focus on my future. Riverwalk is a new beginning for me. I just don't feel like I belong here anymore." When we got to my dorm, it was quiet because most of the women who lived there were at work. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Diego was not very helpful to me, so I just wanted to get through our time together as quickly as I could. I had to be really careful with my timing. I kept looking out the window until I saw what I needed. Then I acted. "Come on, Diego. What are you waiting for?" I urged. "Let's move forward." "What about some warmth and connection?" he asked gently. "No time for that," I replied. "Let's just proceed." Diego climbed on top of me, but it felt really uncomfortable. Just as it was becoming awkward, the door swung open. I shifted slightly to maintain the appearance of being engaged in the moment when Anita shouted. Diego turned to see her, and his expression changed. Anita was upset and raised her voice. She slapped his face hard. Diego tried to protect himself, but she was clearly angry. Suddenly, he lost his balance and fell. He got back up, but it was evident he was hurting. I could see that his injury was acting up again. He must have reopened a wound when he fell. Anita seemed unfazed. She grabbed a heavy bowl from the table and struck Diego with it. The bowl broke and blood appeared on his face. Diego quickly turned around, and in a moment of desperation, he tried to defend himself. Anita started crying and ran out of the room. Diego looked at me, shocked. "You saw that," he said. "She was acting out of line." I nodded. In less than 5 minutes, Anita returned, her cheek red and swollen. Sven, Jesse, and a few others were with her. "There he is," Anita complained. "When I came in, he was attacking Dana and—" "Oh, he didn't attack me," I interjected. "Just as he never harmed you, Anita. We were together. You came in, interrupted us, and then tried to hurt him." "But he's a man," Jesse said. "There's no reason for him to ever harm a woman." "He's already been hurt," I explained. He reopened the wound from earlier while trying to protect himself. Anita had slapped him several times before he fell and then hit him with that bowl. He's still bleeding from it. All he did was lightly respond to her to keep himself safe. Having lived with these people for most of my life, I understood them well. Everything I said was meant to help Diego. I recognized that Anita was upset because she had strong feelings for him. Her desire to protect him had convinced Sven that Diego should stay with us. When Anita found out I was close to Diego, it broke her heart. Her reaction stemmed from jealousy, making it challenging for her to hold it together. Seeing Anita distressed also made Sven very angry. Anita was his daughter, and he cared for her deeply. Jesse was a big man who was married, but he had always liked Anita a little too much, so I knew if he found out he would be very upset. I looked at the ground, feeling ashamed for being caught. "I don't know what happened with you, Dana," Sven said, "but now I understand why Jerry was so upset. He cared for you deeply. You just can't seem to control your feelings for this man. As for you, Diego, maybe I judged you too quickly. Perhaps Riverwalk is the right place for you after all." "But," Diego started to say, "I also think I can get Jerry and Sandy to keep you two busy enough so you can leave first thing in the morning before the wedding," Sven continued. "You should pack your things tonight. You don't need to plan or prepare much since you won't be coming back. Just take the truck and supplies as my farewell gift to you. I'm going to say goodbye now, just in case I don't see you again." "Don't we need to get our tattoos before we leave?" I asked, not really understanding. "You don't need to worry about us forgetting you if you ever come back," he said with a mean tone. "I'll always remember you both, and Jerry will remember you long after I'm gone." He slammed the door hard as he left. "I'm done for," Diego cried. "I was trying so hard to fit in, and now I can't come back. I had everything. I was finding my place here. I even had someone who cared for me. My life was great. And now it's over. It was all a mistake." "Welcome to the club," I shot back. "Stop complaining. Be tough." He stared at me, surprised. I was sitting on the bed with a smile. "You planned this," he said slowly. "Took you a while to figure that out, didn't it?" I replied. "I'll write Sven a letter about it if you cooperate with me. You can have your comfortable life again, but there are a few things you might not want to do anymore." "I'm not going to hurt anyone or take anything," he replied. "Please," I said. "You're acting like someone who just got clean and is now trying to preach to others. You need to think about what you really want. If being with Anita is what you want, you better be ready to act when I ask you to." The night before our wedding was hard for both Sandy and me. We spent the night together for the first time. But when I say together, I mean we just slept. It was really tough. Sandy came to my bed dressed simply. "I don't want to sleep without you ever again," she said. As she got under the covers with me, her warm skin touched mine. I held her close, and she made a soft sound. "Sandy," I complained softly. "This is all about strength," she replied. "I want you just as much as you want me. If you want to be close tonight instead of waiting until tomorrow, it can be our secret." She brought our faces together, and for a moment, there was a shared warmth that lingered between us. Before I knew it, we were lost in each other's embrace, wrapped up in the moment. But that was all we did. We both wanted to make the next day truly special. That's why we had waited for so long. We fell asleep in each other's arms and dreamed sweet dreams about our future together. It showed that even in a world filled with sadness, true love can still shine through. Sadly, we woke up to find that the world was still the same tough place we had come to know. The first thing that broke our sleep was the loud knocking on our door. I walked to the door feeling tired and a bit out of it, and unfortunately I was dealing with a really strong feeling that morning. On the other side of the door stood Gwen Stevens. Gwen worked as one of the cooks. "Hi, Jerry, can you tell Elizabeth that she needs to come here? None of us know how to finish decorating that big cake the way she wants it," she said. Sandy walked up beside me. "Wow," Gwen said. "You two spent the night together, didn't you?" "We didn't sleep together," Sandy replied quickly. "Of course you didn't," Gwen replied with a smirk. "Anyway, tell your mom." "We didn't," Sandy cut her off. "You two shouldn't even see each other before the wedding," Gwen pointed out. "That's nonsense," Sandy replied. "There's no way we can be apart for long. Even the Rabs can't keep us apart, so there's no way a silly old superstition will—" "Whatever," Gwen said, shrugging her shoulders. She looked at us knowingly. "All right, maybe you two didn't do anything, but it seems like you should soon." Sandy and I exchanged glances and shared a quick, tender moment. "That's so sweet," said Gwen. "You should ask your mom to come to the kitchen right away." "Hold on, Gwen," Sandy replied. "Seriously, Mom didn't stay over last night. She, like everyone else in town, thinks we're just busy all the time." "Well, I guess I should start looking for her then," Gwen said, "because none of us have any clue where she is." As she turned to leave, she bent down and picked up a folded piece of paper tied with a ribbon. "Someone left you a nice note," she said, handing it to Sandy. Sandy smiled and opened the paper. After reading it, her smile faded and her eyes filled with tears. I grabbed the note from her hand. I thought someone would have had one of our writers create a nice wedding message. We had writers because, while most of us could read, very few could write well. In a messy handwriting I knew too well, Dana had written, "Hello. This should be a very happy day for you, but it feels like another hurt for me. Maybe it will still feel that way. But I won't leave without bringing you along. I have taken the old lady. I want you to meet me at the big tree by the gate as soon as you read this. Don't waste time planning. Just come. I can't wait. If you don't come, I will hurt the old lady. Maybe I'll hurt her anyway, but she's definitely in danger if you don't come. Come by yourself. If I see more than one person, I will hurt her and leave her for you to find. I do want you to enjoy your last day, though. You were supposed to have your wedding today, right? I want you to still feel happy. So put on your wedding dress. It might get a big red mark on it soon, but wear it anyway. There's one more thing I need. Right now, I'm hurting a lot. I want to share that hurt with the two people who caused it. Taking your mother was meant to hurt you. I also want Jerry to comprehend the pain he caused me, so I need him to watch from the wall to see what happens to you. Your friend, Dana." As I read the letter, my mind raced. "Get your sniper rifle," I said. "What?" she asked, looking puzzled. "Sandy, that tree is at least 200 yards from the wall," I explained. "No one but you could make that shot." I picked up another one of my favorite swords from the shelf in the weapon closet. "I've never seen you use that sword," Sandy noted. "It looks different." "It's the sword an old actor named Wesley Snipes used in a movie called Blade," I said. "It's a unique sword. It's almost like a mix between a katana and a Roman soldier's sword. But let's talk about swords later. Right now, we need to deal with the roaches." She grabbed her sniper rifle. "Sandy, did they make any other wedding dresses for you?" I asked. "No," she replied. "Why do you ask?" "Well, do they have any other dresses that are similar?" I asked again. "No, silly, it's one of a kind." Our wedding is the first big celebration anyone has heard of in a long time, she said with pride. Wow, I said. I'll do my best not to mess it up. I need you to write a note to Dana. Dana and I could hardly see the gate from where we stood. The night before, we had left the note on the front porch of my old house. Diego waited for Elizabeth to finish in the kitchen. We had both walked through there a few times. The old woman was a wonderful cook. Most of the dishes she made for the wedding were simply delicious. Of course, the big multi-tiered cake was her best creation. The cake was so big that everyone in the community could enjoy a slice or two. It felt like it should have been mine to celebrate. I started to think if the cake could be used at a funeral or a wedding. It seemed like such a waste not to share it. Later that evening, as Elizabeth left the kitchen to go to the dorm she shared with her staff, Diego rendered her unable to move and secured her with the other supplies we were allowed to take. Early this morning, Jesse checked everything for us. He and his team made sure the camp was safe while they let us out of the gate. I really wish things could end better, Dana, he said. You're just upset you didn't have a chance with me, I replied. But at least you care that I'm leaving. Here's a goodbye gift. I shifted slightly to attract his attention. He looked surprised as I climbed into the truck next to Diego, and we drove off. A few hours later, Diego and I sat in front of the large tree. It felt fitting that things would end here. The same tree where she had shown she could take my place in my husband's life, both as his partner and companion. It was a good spot because it was far from the wall, so those guys couldn't bother us. This also gave us a head start. The only vehicle that might catch up was Jerry's Mustang. When Sandy fell, I knew Jerry would be so shocked that he wouldn't know what to do. But once he came to his senses, he would desire to resolve things. One of two things would happen. He might get in his car and come after us, thinking we were going to River Walk, but we weren't. Or he might come after us with intent to confront Diego. I believed Jerry would never harm me. He cared for me too much and for too long to ever raise a hand against me. Sure, he could easily confront Diego, but he would never direct his anger towards me. Now that Sandy was gone, maybe Jerry and I could be together someday. I thought it would take time, but it wasn't impossible. Even if Jerry did manage to confront me, it wouldn't really matter. I'd feel lost without him anyway. As we looked on, the gate opened, and one person in white stepped out. From far away, I could tell it was Sandy, even with the wedding dress and the distance between us. I couldn't see her clearly. It was too far and the sun wasn't fully up. But I knew it was Sandy. I had paid close attention to her over the past few days. I wondered what she had that I didn't. One thing she had was the small limp from when I knocked her off the wall. The person coming out of the gate was trying not to show it, but the limp was there. There were a couple of guards nearby, and someone from the wall shot at them. It took a few shots to bring them down. I was sure that Sandy was the one walking towards us. Diego held the leash we attached to the older woman. "This had better work," he said. "Just be quiet," I replied sharply. "All you have to do is something you've wanted to do anyway." "But I don't want to now," he countered. "If you don't make a move on Sandy, I won't write the note for Sven," I warned him. "I've been thinking about this," he said. "We need to change our plan. If I upset Sandy, Jerry will come after me. I could get hurt, and even if I don't, there's no way I could go back. I'd be stuck with you. I think Plan B is better." "Okay, Plan B it is," I replied. "We let the old lady go and drop Sandy off in front of a big group of rabs." Diego really was a fool. When Sandy arrived, I planned to shout about how Diego had made me do everything. He was the one who had knocked her mother out. I had spent every moment the old lady was awake pretending to help her get free from the ropes. Earlier today, Diego came in again and knocked her out. This time, he used a cloth with a strong smell that we had taken from the clinic while I feigned stopping him. Then, in front of Sandy, I would use the knife I had hidden on my leg to try to stop Diego. If it all went right, Sandy would be on my side. With her and her mother assisting me, I might be able to stay safe. As long as I was around Jerry, there would still be a chance for us to be together again. I waited a few months, and then Sandy had a terrible accident. I had been looking into guns, and it wouldn't have been hard for me to block the barrel of her sniper rifle. She often left it lying around since no one else could really use it. I got my knife ready as Sandy came closer, but when she arrived, I felt a strange sensation. Unfortunately, it was too late for me to change anything. Suddenly, Diego jumped up and ran away, yelling like he was scared. I'm not going near her, he shouted. He'll hurt me if I get too close. I'm out of here. He dropped the old lady's chains and took off running. I was shocked. I didn't know how to fix the situation. Sandy suddenly lifted her dress and chased after Diego. She didn't even slow down as she ran past me. Then I saw that Diego slowed down as he got close to the truck. I remembered the injury he had. Sandy had caught up to him. She took off her veil and dropped the dress. In that moment, I understood why she had fooled him so easily. Sandy wasn't really Sandy. It was Jerry wearing the dress. Diego tried to jump into the truck, but Jerry was quicker. The sword moved like lightning and struck with precision. It cut into the big muscles in Diego's thigh. He cried out as he fell from the truck. I swear this was her plan, Diego shouted, rolling on the ground in distress. It doesn't matter, Jerry replied. You've caused too many problems since you arrived. I should have ended you the day I caught you with her. You knew she was mine, but I was foolish and let you live. Because of that, you brought more trouble. My kindness has hurt my people. You broke Anita's heart. You lied and stole. The world is better off without you. It's hard enough that we have to face the Rabs. We don't need to fight each other. He lifted his sword while Diego shrank back in fear. Oh no, I can't do this, said Jerry. As Jerry turned to me, Diego snatched a small knife from his boot, but before Diego could even lift the knife, Jerry swiftly turned and struck. Diego dropped the weapon, rendered unable to continue. Wow! Jerry exclaimed, surprised. He rushed back to where I was, gathering the white, foamy fabric. Phew! He sighed. If I'd gotten any of Diego's blood on this dress, Sandy would have been really mad. He walked over to the old lady and gently woke her up. As her eyes opened, he showed her the dress. Mom, can we fix this in time for a wedding? He asked. She looked at him, still a bit sleepy, then hugged him tightly. She glanced at the fabric and smiled. Jerry picked her up and carried her to the truck while I stood there, surprised. I thought he would say something or at least express his frustration with me. What about me? I shouted. Jerry picked up the dress and placed it gently in the truck. Jerry! I yelled. What are you going to do about me? He walked over and let out a big sigh. He pulled out that sword so quickly that it seemed to appear in his hand. For a moment, I was really scared, but then I looked into his eyes. Nothing, he said. I'm not going to do anything. I know you could never hurt me, Jerry, I replied. You're upset with me, but deep down, you still care. He handed me a piece of paper and nodded. I guess I do, he said softly. Maybe a small part of my heart will always be with you. So what happens to me? I asked. I'm all alone out here. You can't just leave me like this. The answers you need aren't coming from me, he replied. Sven is always the one making the choices, isn't he? I asked. Just read the note and look at the gate, he said, glancing back. I couldn't believe he thought I would walk all the way to the gate, but at least I could go home. I focused on the note. The writing was really nice. A harsh word. The last time we talked, I promised I would do something very terrible to you, didn't I? Jerry. When I started the truck, I checked the rearview mirror. I saw Dana looking at the note and then at the wall. The impact of our last encounter had left a mark on her. I felt uneasy as I stared at the scene before me. Then, as I drove, the tension lingered in the air, and the note slipped from her fingers. As I drove toward the wall, I noticed the gate was open. I quickly understood why. The area was no longer guarded. It turned out to be a nice day for a wedding, after all. Sandy met me at the gate and wrapped her arms around me. I smiled back at her. Her mom hopped out of the truck in a hurry. You two need to separate. You can't see each other before the wedding, she shouted. Oh no, I have so much frosting to make. Sandy looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. For what? I asked. I knew she had to go. The two of us could never be happy with her here. She was acting so strange, I couldn't handle it. You had to. But I never liked her, she said. I promise I'll give you something special in your life to make you happy again. I just laughed. You already have, silly, I said. But I could see in her eyes that Sandy was contemplating something deeper. 9 months and 1 day later, our daughter Dana was born.
What's up, story lovers? This is the Story Guy, and if you're hungry for crazy tales and mind-blowing narratives, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our weekly dose of crazy, cheating stories, fun fiction, and gut-ripping comedy from around the world. But that's not all. We also create our own original stories, and trust me, you won't find these anywhere else. Want even more spine-tingling reads? Head down to the description and grab our exclusive story collections. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.